Heidi ho, good neighbors. How are you? My new setup behind me, as you can see, as I finish fulfilling Indiegogo. This is Phil Russert. This is Creatorcon Q&A, episode 117. I know we've kind of been away for a few weeks. It's been pretty crazy and hectic, but if you're going to come back strong. We have an awesome guest tonight. He's not only a really great guy, but I'm sure you have his work in your collection, and we're going to talk about that as well as his career. Before we get started, I just want to remind everybody, November 1st, Tragedy hits issue number 2 to Kickstarter, so please go check that out. The link is available now to be notified of its launch. I believe it's going to be 7 p.m. I will notify you and be sure for that after. Roy Mercado, what's going on, buddy? Rick, how are you, my friend? Thanks for coming out. Please share this out to everybody. Let's give a little love to our guest. He deserves it. He's been a 30-year-plus veteran of the comic industry. He is a nice guy to talk to. He's a really talented artist. He's put Spider-Man on the map so many times with different storylines and everything with Web of Spider-Man and the comic strips we used to love on Sundays. He's also done DC with Superman and Flash and Green Lantern, the Phantom. He's done so much. He's been everywhere. I'd like to welcome our guest, Marvel DC artist, Alex Saviuk.
Hey, hello, everybody.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I can't complain. Even if I did, nobody would listen.
I know. Yeah, you're exactly right. Sometimes people ask me, "How you doing?" And I go, I pause and I go, I probably should just say I'm doing okay, because otherwise, hey, I don't want to waste your time.
Yeah. Do you want the short answer or the long answer?
Yeah.
Rick said your Hobgoblin covers from his Spider-Man run as some of his favorites.
Oh, Rick. I was going to say, Rick, you look like a girl, but that picture you have there on your...
that's not him. That's just a picture.
No, that's not him. That's a very nice picture.
He's a much uglier man.
That's why that pretty picture is there, of course. You know. No offense, Rick.
No, he's a good guy. He's cool. So thanks for coming out. I had to cancel on you last week. I do apologize.
No
when
problem.
I wound up getting that table at the last minute New York Con, it was just so much, and I want to devote the proper time for you. So I appreciate you understanding that.
Oh yeah. No, I was living vicariously through you at New York Comic Con.
Yeah.
Because
yeah,
I was.
Well, yeah, you're a normal stay at that show. We missed you.
But hey, there'll be next year. I'm doing Baltimore this coming weekend, 3-day show, and then the following weekend I'll be in Denver for a I think it's Fan Expo, Denver, 3 days there.
I heard that's a good show.
Well, I was in Denver back in 2016 when it was run by a different organization. But, I mean, they have a huge showroom floor. The place was very steady, very busy. I was very busy for the time frame that I was there. It was a really, really good show. So I'm looking forward to going back.
Well, I have to tell you.
I'm sorry.
No,
I was going to say, just for the people who I'm not familiar with it yet, but Fan Expo, which is a Canadian organization that came into America, and they bought out MegaCon Orlando and a few other shows. One of them, obviously, Denver. And I understand that they pretty much picked up about another 6 conventions that used to be run by Wizard.
Okay.
Yeah, so next year there'll be a couple of cities that, again, I'm looking forward to going to because I've never been there.
Well, as much as like the hot writer right now or whatever the case may be is an attraction at these shows, these shows need the veteran, artists that built this world, this industry, from the 70s, 80s, 90s. And you guys always do well at these shows because people are clamoring for your work. They miss you. They want commissions. I wish DC and Marvel would wake the hell up and get on board, but that's another story.
Well, the thing is that, yes, when I do go to these conventions, 9 times out of 10, you get young people that come by. And I'll say, well, how are you? How do you know my work? Or they'll say, wow, we really love this old style. When they say the old school style, I don't take offense to it because they're saying it with a sense of joy that they really appreciate that particular style.
Yeah, it's a compliment.
And then I'll say, well, how are you familiar with it? oh, my dad has a big collection of your work, and he's passed it down to us. And yeah, we look at it and we say, wow, this stuff is really cool. And I'm not just saying for myself, but for all of my colleagues that were in that particular era. And again, speaking of us so-called older guys, I'm working for a publisher right now named Austin Huff, who's created a company called Power Comics. And the Kickstarter went underway just last week for this 164-page story that he's written. And also, he's collected a whole bunch of us older guys to do the art. I mean, he's got me, John Bogdanov. He's got Joe Rubenstein, Al Milgrom.
Nice.
He's found a whole, just so many people. Alan Weiss, whose name comes to mind. I mean, I don't think he's done anything in comics in such a long time, but Austin was able to pull him out of quote unquote retirement, if you will. And what he did was, his project is called Bring On the Masters. And it's really, we're the masters, more or less. And like I said, 164-page story, and all kinds of cool stuff going on in there. I'm doing 17 pages. Okay, so yeah, I'm in the middle of doing it now, having fun, and can't wait for. I think basically what it is there's 5 chapters encompassing the 164 pages. I'm working on my stuff is in, I think, the first chapter in the first book, and then I'll be doing stuff in the 3rd chapter, another 14 pages, 3 pages to start, and then 14. And what he did was he took characters from, I guess, the 40s that were pretty much public domain.
Yeah.
And he had basically, we kind of revised their costumes and stuff. Alan Weiss revised the costume of his guy. Ron Wilson revised his costume. I just did a little bit of a revision on my guy. And, so everybody looks different. And what he's done, he's gotten teams of us. Like I did a cover for West Coast Avengers Annual #1 back in 1986. When I first got to Marvel in that year, they were looking for things for me to do after I had done a couple of fill-ins. So then I was doing covers, etc. And so I did this cover, and it was inked by Jeff Isherwood. And basically, he got Jeff Isherwood to come in and ink this cover that I did, which basically was an homage to our own cover. We have a back view of the villain, and then the 6 major heroes are in front of the villain, basically in similar poses as I had drawn them back in 1986. So it came out really sweet, and I can't wait for people to see it. And yeah, I think it's really a lot of fun. So, but anyway,
Rob Powers says, hey. Robert Manning says, yo. He says he's a huge fan of your Flash run. Obviously, we're gonna, the famous issue we will talk about was a 275 where Iris is bumped off. But Marianne Childress is a first-time viewer. How are you? Thanks for coming out. She's an artist as well.
Oh, nice.
And Andrew Dodge said, "Evening, gents. It's good to have you all here. Thanks." Yeah, I love the mix of old school, quote unquote, and new school, but you got to respect what came before. I mean, you have to, I don't know why they're not, but it's these new editors. But anyway, you and I briefly talked about a Terrificon, but I'm not going to go there right now. Before I get into my questions, Rick wanted to ask, for someone that was around during the boom of American comics and also the lows, do you feel it is on the way back up now that the indie comics have become as big as they have? Well,
actually, I'm quite honestly with digital comics becoming so popular, I'm pleasantly surprised that we still have so many comics out there. We have web comics, of course, but we also have a lot of comics out there in print. And right. So whether it's indie comics with all the creator-owned stuff, I'm working on this stuff, as I had mentioned now, but one of the things that I really like to get into myself is to, hook up with a writer buddy of mine and come up with something creator-owned. And whether it's a huge success or not, it's just the fact that we'll finally be able to do something that we really would like to do. And just like the way it was before I became a professional, I sat and wrote and drew my own comics just because for the fun of it, right? You just got so excited about doing it. And I'm not saying I want to do this because I'm independently wealthy, because I'm not. But I think it would really be fun to do something. And in my case, other than superheroes, I'd like to get, I like detective type stuff, nitty gritty. I mean, I'm sure you remember Jim Steranko's Chandler book,
Yeah.
set in the 40s, whatever, overcoats, hats, shadows.
Absolutely.
Ben Fatale, so all that kind of neat stuff. That would be so much fun. With a supernatural twist.
Well, I think there's a need for that, actually. I mean, noir is big again, and everybody loves crime stories, so you should do it for sure. Robert had asked if you're doing a cons this year. He is going to be at Baltimore this coming weekend, but any chance you'll be at C2E2 in Chicago in December?
Yes, I will be at C2E2. I've already, signed some contracts and stuff, and got my hotel room. Just have to get my flight going. Looking forward to it. I'm looking forward also to be breaking out my winter stuff that I haven't worn in God knows how long. Okay, so I'm in line for a little bit of culture shock, but with the weather, but it'll be fine. Oh, Keith Brunswick, hi, miss seeing you at Cincinnati Comic. Yes, actually, what happened was I really wanted to get back to Cincinnati, but I ended up at Salt Lake City at a convention that they had, and this was I think the third time that they invited me, and I finally was able to go, because the first two I had to cancel out because living in Florida, both times, coincidentally, there was a hurricane threat. The first one, the hurricane came through, and it was like, okay, fine, we'll do it next year. And the second one was in 2019, and it came through. They closed my airport down, which I would have used to get out there. But then the following day, the sun came out. There wasn't that much rain, so it was mostly wind. And I called them up and said, hey, listen, I can still make it for 2 days out of the 3. And they said, no, that's kind of messing things up with the budget, because in those days, not like with COVID, if you want to make a change on your flight, they're not charging you. But back then, you'd have to get the difference between the flight passed and the new flight plus the penalty fee. So they said, let's do it in 2020. And then, of course, we had nothing in 2020. And so this year I finally went. And so it conflicted with Cincinnati. So hopefully I can get to Cincinnati next year.
Well, Robert is excited. He's a 6'5". Sorry, I'm getting some feedback. He's a 6'5", Buddy the Elf, and he has a 275 for you to sign.
Oh, okay. Well, I saw your previous question, and yes, I along with 95% of my colleagues do charge for autographs. So I held out as long as I could, and when I got to New York Comic Con, I don't know how many years ago, and I sat next to Rich Buckler, may he rest in peace. Yeah. And Rich was charging, I think, $3 for an autograph, whereas a lot of people were charging $5. And I said, really? You charging $3? He goes, well, yeah, you got to charge something, because it's almost like the people expect you are expecting to pay for something. I said, really? I said, I don't know. I feel kind of weird. So the whole show, people came up to me with 2 books, 4 books, 8 books. How much are you charging? I said, well, I'm not charging. Oh, okay. And so I was besieged by books because I wasn't charging. And then I think the following year, whatever year it was, I don't remember, I started charging, I think, $3, 2 for $5. And then eventually it was just $5. And now just recently, coming back from the pandemic, most guys, raised it up to $10. So I felt a little weird, but I said, how much are you charging? I'm charging $10. Seemed everybody I asked was charging $10. And there are those holdouts that still don't charge, and I applaud them, but I guess
there's no retirement plan as an artist.
Well, thankfully I do. When I was working at Marvel, okay, one of the things about Marvel, they were really highly company oriented. Not that DC Comics wasn't, but at Marvel, I had a contract and I was there for freelancing for about 1.5 years almost. And then I was doing fill-ins at that time for Jim Salicrup, the editor of SpiderMan. And I remember him saying, hey, are you on the contract? And I said, No. He goes, how come? I said, because nobody ever offered me one. He goes, oh, well, you should have asked. I said, well, I know the worst question is the one you don't ask, but I just figured, hey, it just didn't dawn on me to ask. And so I signed a contract. As soon as you did, you became a freelance, you became an employee working at home. And they had a particular designation for that. And so basically, even though I had a schedule, even though I wasn't, it was some kind of a tax designation where I still had to file a Schedule C, which is for freelancers, and yet they were taking taxes out of my checks, which were directly deposited every two weeks, and I got benefits. I had a medical plan and a dental plan.
Wow.
So much that when I moved to Florida and I had a toothache, I went to this clinic because I had no other dentist as a recommendation. And they're looking at my insurance and they're going, wow, you got great insurance. I said, oh, I do? Oh, yes. And then they examined me and they gave me the report. I needed 2 root canals. They wanted to give me a bridge. And I said, wait a second, I have no pain. What's with the root canals? And then I finally found the dentist and he said, oh, yeah, you do have great, unbelievable insurance, but he says you don't need all that stuff done.
So they were like, you don't get covered. They were trying to milk. Wow.
Oh, man, they wanted to kill me on that. But at any rate, so yeah, and they had a 401k.
Wow.
So from 1988 to 1996, when I left Marvel for 8 years, I was able to sock away whatever the maximum was at that time, 8% or whatever. And then they did matching in the whole 9 yards. And I was able to save up a nice chunk of money. And, but once you leave, you got to reinvest it and all that stuff. So, which is what I did. But
times have changed, though. Jeez.
Oh, yeah. I don't think that I don't know if the companies are doing that anymore, because I remember when John Romita Jr. was leaving Marvel to go to DC, and somebody said, yeah, they rolled out the red carpet for John. I said, well, what does that mean? Were they giving him a 401k? Were they giving him this, that? And they said, well, they weren't doing that at Marvel anymore. And I said, they weren't doing it anymore. And again, it's, when you have that matching plan thing going on in the 401ks, if they want to cut corners, well, then they do away with it.
Right.
Maybe they give you some sort of an IRA-based type of a situation, but I never bothered to inquire.
I think it's all just freelance hire, pay for work for hire.
Yeah, and again, there are. It's funny because I was reading some little article today, and it said, the average freelancer makes about 36 or 37,000 a year, but and I'm thinking, well, I guess maybe that's considered the average freelancer, because I'm sure I would bet the last dollar in my wallet that for all those guys, and God bless them, who have those big contracts at Marvel and DC, and there probably are maybe less than a dozen for each company, if even that much. And those guys have a great deal going. And it's the freelancers outside of contracts that are making the same money that I made when I left Marvel back in 1996, if not less.
I was about to say probably less.
Yeah, because now I understand you can. They have a tier system where if you're working for a big seller, you make, like 3x. If you work for a medium seller, you're making 2x. You work for a low seller or just on the cusp, then you're making X. So you just they figure, well, listen, that'll inspire you to get the books to sell more, do your best work, and maybe you'll get into the next tier and you'll get a raise. Gee, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for incentivizing me.
Yeah, I'm not going to do my best work on a daily basis because, now I need the inspiration because somebody's over my back with a whip that says, do better. So, anyway.
By the way, comic fanzine, the legendary Alex.
Oh, well, thank you.
Marianne Childress had a question. Do you have any advice for a young comic artist really wanting to get into the industry?
Well, I would say I get asked that question quite a bit. And of course, one of the generalizations is to say, number one, you have to be able to draw everything. And when I say everything, it's because, just look around you, look around you outside the window, take a walk, look at your environment, go into the city, look at all the cars, look at all the buildings, look at all the things you take for granted, like telephone poles. There's always telephone poles with wires running down the streets. and I am guilty of having left those out for the most part. Okay, although I did this one story called this one character called Airwave for DC Comics many moons ago, and he had roller skates where he rode on the telephone pole, so it sort of made you more aware of it. But there are all these things you take for granted: telephone poles, one-way signs, fire hydrants, everything that makes up the city, and buildings. Every building is a character in itself. I mean, you'd be hard-pressed unless you're in some sort of a cookie-cutter suburban community where the builder only has 3 elevations for the front of the houses,
Right.
so that you walk down, you go, well, that guy's house looks like my house and Ed's house. But in New York City, every building is a character to itself. The shape of the windows, the heights, the things that are on top of the roofs. When Frank Miller first started drawing Daredevil, he was hanging out on rooftops in Hell's Kitchen, just sketching and, I don't know, taking photos of all the cool things that are on top of those buildings to give it the flavor of what it is that he was drawing. You got to get the feel of the environments that you're working in. And even though if you're computer savvy, there are certain programs that I'm aware of, something that I've never used, but I'll probably look into it at some point, called SketchUp. And SketchUp gives you buildings, cars, planes, trains,
Nice.
and what the thing is, it gives you a 3D view of all
So you can
these.
get the different angles of it.
Yeah, so you can get the different angles that you need, and then I guess you screenshot it, print it out for yourself if that's what you need. And you can also create environments in there. So if, let's say, for example, the writer gives you a room. Okay, you want to create that room, so you set up all your props, and then you can take that, you can then screenshot that room from every single angle. So when you've got, people, 2 people or 3 people in conversation in one corner of the room, there might be something important on a shelf or on a table that maybe the camera can go right past, but you've already set that up in your establishing shot. Aside from that, I would say, if you're not signed up to go to an art school, if not saying that art school isn't expensive, but there's no substitute for getting an education in a school that, for comics, is run by professionals. Namely, let's say the Joe Kubert School, okay?
Yeah.
And also, if you can, I believe in Savannah, Georgia, there is a group called SCAD. It used to be run by the, unfortunately, may he rest in peace again, Tom Lyle, who left us way too young.
Yeah.
And he ran the program down there for storytelling, storyboarding. And now that I'm mentioning storyboarding, when you talk about a young aspiring comic artist, one of the things is that besides comics, for myself, I've also storyboarded, let's say I'd say about a half a dozen independent films. And storyboarding is really just, you have to be aware of a certain language. When the director wants you to zoom in, zoom out, dolly up, dolly across, pan. And there's 3 or 4 pages of definitions and terms that they're going to use when they work with you to give them a sequential setup for camera placements. And these things are very valuable. I'm sure you've gone to Barnes & Noble or any of these bookstores where you can, look up the making of a particular movie. They will have storyboards in there, and they're really vital for a director to be able to look at this blueprint, which is what the storyboard ends up being, of sequential panels. All right. Because I had the storytelling experience, I was working on a movie called The Reaping back in 2005 and 6. And I know it was 2005. It got delayed because of Katrina, and we were in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And the director, his name is Stephen Hopkins. And Stephen Hopkins is, you're probably familiar with some of his movies like Predator 2, also Lost in Space from 1997, 98. Also, one of my favorite movies was, the name escapes me right now, with Michael Douglas and Val Kilmer and the 2 lions.
Oh, Black Rain? No, not Black Rain.
No, not Black Rain.
I know
the Ghost and the Darkness. That's it. He directed that, and it's really fun to I actually went to Louisiana from Florida, and I was there for about 3 months working with the special effects guys. But besides doing storyboards for movies, you can also do storyboards for TV commercials. When you see those car commercials where the car's zipping, every half a second there's a new panel. Those panels get all planned out in the storyboard for the director to go ahead and shoot those panels from every conceivable angle. All right, and so when
you get paid more than you do in comics.
Excuse me?
And you do get paid more than you do in comics.
Yes, you get paid much more. I mean, when I first started working in comics in 1977, actually, my first professional job was doing a storyboard for a TV ad. It was a spot, had like a keyframe or like a splash frame, and then I had to do 6 panels. Each of the panels paid, and I had an agent, and he got 25%. And after the 25%, I still made $37.50 per panel. Okay, oh, wow. So now you add that. This is 1977. You add that up, and it comes out to over $200. And then it was another $250 for this big frame that I did. And when I got to DC Comics, and I'll tell you that story in a second of how I got there. My first page rate was $25 per page of pencil. Really? And I was happy to get it because I wanted to do comics. Okay, and if I could use that as a segue as to how I got into comics, I did go to the School of Visual Arts in New York City. Actually, just to backtrack first, when as a kid, I always felt like, okay, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a medical doctor, a surgeon, specialist, but I also like drawing. So I'll probably just draw on the side. I'm going to draw for fun. And as it turned out, as time went on, the fun part was sporadic. Here and there, I would still do comics. But I got to college and I was, major doing pre-med. I wanted to go into bio and stuff like that. I did that for about 2.5 years, and then I sort of got disenchanted with it. And at the same time, I was playing in a band, playing rock music in a band to pay my way through college.
What do you play?
I play keyboards. I have 10 years in classical piano training.
Oh, wow. And, I'm a drummer. When do you want to play?
Excuse me?
I'm a drummer and a singer. When do you want to play?
Oh, drummer. Oh, I used to sing all the bluesy stuff like Teddy Pendergrass and James Brown.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we got a singer here, Greg Johnston, too. He said, hello, sorry he's late. Let's get a jam going.
Hey, as a matter of fact, when I was staying in New York Comic Con with some of my buddies who own a comic book shop in outside of Boston, we had Lee Weeks come over because he also plays guitar, and we had a jam in the hotel room. So it was kind of neat.
That's great.
I didn't have a keyboard or anything, but just listening, playing tunes and things like that. It's kind of neat, But anyway, going back to storyboards, what I want to say about that, and for movies, if you can get it, and for TV commercials, again, if you can get it, it's pretty competitive. But the one thing we have in our favor right now is that when I lived up in Long Island and New York City, that was a hub for storyboards, where the big advertising agencies reigned. Okay, if you were in the city, hey, you could hoof it down to all those agencies, send them flyers, go there, follow up in person. Now we have the internet. I mean, when you were talking about comics also going, if there's an increase in comics, when you look at one of those previews magazines that comes out whenever it comes out, and you look through there and it's global. I mean, you got artists from Turkey and and South
Brazil
America,
and Philippines, like Roy Mercado's from the Philippines.
Well, I mean, we had the Philippine artists come in back in the early 70s when Joe Orlando and Paul Levitz and whoever a third party was went down to the Philippines and looked at these and hired these guys to come and work for DC. And those guys were incredible. I mean, they had to work so fast and be so good at what they do and be so proficient. Wow, I remember talking to Alfredo Alcala, who has was inking a lot of John Buscema's Conan stuff. And I asked him, I said, hey, how fast do you work? Because if you're familiar with Alfredo Alcala, Alcala, he's got a very etching type of a style, okay? Very detailed, very linear. And he says, well, he says, when I work on John Buscema layouts, I can do 5 pages a day. I said, what? 5 pages a day? And he goes, and if I pencil and ink myself, I do 3 pages a day. I said, you're kidding. I said, how long? The next key question, how long is your day? Because, some people think, oh, your day is 8 hours. Oh, no. He goes, no, I start at 9 and I finish at midnight. So he's working a 15-hour day, but think of still the amount of work in those 15 hours.
Exactly.
The pencil and ink, 3 pages. I mean, he's got to eat. He's got to, take a little break here and there. So let's say 4.5 hours a page to knock out stuff like that. That's crazy.
I know. And Rudy Nebris, you had Rudy Nebris too.
Yes. I mean, you had, they said that they paid so little in the Philippines. That's why you had to just do all the quantity. I mean, maybe got for pencils and inks, maybe they got paid like, $20 a page. So in order to make a living, they had to do 3 pages a day. That's crazy. So when they come to America and they go, well, we'll give you $50 a page, they're probably like keeled over and fainted,
Right.
So, but at any rate, so what I'm saying about the storyboarding aspect is that that's a plan B. Okay, you always have to you can't put all your eggs into a basket. I mean, even legendary Neil Adams said that so many moons ago when he opened up Continuity Studios with Dick Giordano, and he had guys working in there because he was doing comics, he was doing record album covers, he was doing book illustrations, he was doing storyboards for TV, storyboards for movies. He was, he did everything. And because there are always going to be those lulls in a particular part of an industry sometimes where, well, in my day, when I was lucky enough to get in, when I finished a job, they gave me this next job with a check. And I said, okay, thank you very much. And I never looked back. Whether it was at DC or at Marvel, as soon as I finished a job, I got another job. Now, my first local comic gig was $10 USD for a 12-page comic. Haha. Hey, I hear you, but the thing is that, I'm sorry, what was the name of that person that was just on?
Roy Mercado.
Roy, I'll put it this way. You do that 12-page comic, okay, and you give it your best, and you were going to do that 12-page comic anyway, because you love the medium, you love what you do. And the fact that you got $120 for it after that is just a huge bonus, because you want to keep doing, you want to get yourself out there. And by doing that story, hey, I don't know where it's actually being published, who's going to see it, but the fact is that more people are going to see it than if you would have just, let's say, drawn it for yourself and didn't get it out there. So that's a good thing, because you have to be seen. In the old days, you could take, whatever samples, stick them in the mail, send it to the comic book company, and eventually, maybe 6 months later, you're figuring, oh, you're defeated. Oh, they never got to my stuff, because they had piles and piles of all these samples. Eventually, maybe a stack fell over and they picked one up and they go, all right, fine, let's open this one. And you got lucky, and they go, wow, this guy's good. Give him a call. And now, well, you can't even send them stuff on the internet. I mean, maybe if you have a website, they'll look at your stuff, but you can't send them attachments because there's just too much hacking going on. But the fact is that you have to go to the big comic book shows these days in order to get onto a list, sort of like American Idol or The Voice. They have to look at the assistants look at your portfolio first to see that you're even worth a nickel, so that the next row of editors can look at you without, handing you a new one and going, you know what, you got a lot of work and stuff, but come see us again in 6 months, So if you get that opportunity to be interviewed at a comic book convention by the editors, by the guys that hire, I guess that's what you have to do these days. I mean, you end up doing what you're doing. And the same thing goes for advertising agencies. You can look up film commissions. If you're doing storyboards, there are some good books out there on storyboarding. My agent, who is more of a part-time agent these days than not, because he's so busy with the stuff that he's doing, when things do come in for storyboards and stuff like that, he will still give me a call, and I'll end up doing a few things. But it was just there was more call for it back in the, I'd say even in the last couple of decades. Now, unfortunately, there are some storyboard programs out there where the directors can actually pretty much put their own storyboards together and not have to spend to hire the freelance guy. But then there are still some agencies that like that personal touch. They don't want to have these, cold guys running around in a program. So I'm going to touch on, I just touched on storyboards. And also one of the other things too is that if you're, I know drawing on paper, that's my thing. I only do some corrections here and there in Photoshop and some coloring. But, and I don't have one of these Wacom tablets where you can just draw right on the tablet and you're looking at the screen. I have one of these, the ones that are flat on the desk. It's called a Wacom Intuos. And I can look at the screen as I'm drawing on it, which is cool, but you can't use a ruler. You can't use any curves. When you're drawing on the screen, you can use all those tools and just save the files. Now, saving files and, the fact that people go, oh, it's so much faster. Yeah, but if you're doing comics where original artwork is still in demand, and if you do comics in the computer, maybe you'll do them faster, but you're not going to have any original artwork to sell.
And that's what I tell people. I'm a small-time rep, and I tell them, I said, listen, I know that it's quicker, it's easier, edits are easier, but you're missing out on that whole secondary market of selling that original art, and there's a huge, hungry demand for that, and you can get good money for it. And
sure.
And not to say this blatantly, but that's also cash to hand a lot of times, So, don't miss out on that because you want the quick, easy way to draw a book. I try to tell that to the guys all the time.
I mean, there's a story from even years ago when it wasn't that popular to do comic books in the computer, where this one artist decided he was going to do a Spider-Man story, a graphic novel for Marvel. I think it was 64 pages, and it was all painted and whatever in the computer. Looked really great. But then afterwards, people were clamoring for original artwork. And he said, he went back to Marvel and he said, hey, listen, I want to convert some of my files, basically to original artwork and redraw these pages and do recreations. And I guess because it was, again, a work for hire thing, in the contract for that, it said now that you have the digital age coming in, they revised contracts where it said that he could only do like a half a dozen pages out of the 64. So basically, you go, well, I could have had 64 original art pages, and I wouldn't have had to ask permission. But now they said, oh yeah, you can only do a half a dozen.
Wow. Jim O'Reilly says he prints out his roughs and Lightbox my work to make originals. That's what he does.
Hey, I've been doing it for ages. Yeah, I still love my Lightbox, even though I did go through a period in at DC and Marvel where I still to this day, even on my roughs, I use a non-photo blue pencil. It's got a waxy quality instead of the graphite, which
Mike Lilly does that.
Who?
Mike Lilly.
Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the waxy quality of the lead, or if you want to call it lead versus graphite, because the graphite gets on your hand, it gets dirty, you're smearing it all over the page. The blue goes nowhere. And then yet when I'm even doing, whether I'm doing originals, well, if I'm doing originals, I'm lightboxing, okay? And I may just do some outlining, since if I'm inking it myself, the pencils obviously aren't going to be as tight as if I was giving it to an inker.
Right.
And I like that process of doing a layout. Then if you want to just call it a breakdown, and then I go to ink and I'll put in my details with my pen and brush, as opposed to, doing super tight pencils and then almost to the point where you go, well, maybe I should just scan these in and like touch them up and I'll send them in. And again, there are some companies that do that to save money. I'm sure you're aware of that. The inkers then become a thing of the past because they're going, just tighten up your pencils,
They've been trying to get rid of inkers for decades. They even went through that phase where they try to have colorists go right over the pencils. It just loses something, in my opinion.
Oh, it does.
It loses so much.
I mean, I remember even back in the day, probably in the 70s or early 80s, John Byrne did a book where they scanned directly from his pencils, and then they colored it. And of course, they didn't have like the advanced coloring and the advanced printing that they have now, where that's kind of, I would say, I would compare that to watching, having a 65-inch plasma in your room, and you're watching even like a 4K edition of Star Trek from the 60s.
Right.
Okay. And you realize how fake those sets were, right? And, the rocks that they pick up, and they go, oh man, and look at those bushes, everything looks so hokey.
Meanwhile, we love hokey.
Oh,
I
hokey's
miss
okay.
hokey. But I
Hokey's
know what you're
okay.
saying, exactly the clarity that's brought to it. We had a few questions.
Sure.
Robert's been chomping at the bit here. What will you be charging at C2E2? If you
Uh,
already know, I have 10 flash issues for you to sign. He's very excited to meet you.
Okay, well, Bob, first of all, I'll tell you this right now. I do charge $10 per autograph. However, you come to me, I've done this for everybody that comes to me with multiple books. I always give you a deal. I'm not trying to hose you for my autograph, but you've come to me with 10 books. You'll go away happy.
Cool. And Will Playton had a question. Will Playton's an Australian artist I have the great pleasure of repping. He's really talented.
Okay.
What keeps you fresh in terms of composing your sequential pages, and do you draw influence from outside of comics as well?
Well, what keeps it fresh, I guess, for me is just thankfully, when I read a script or I read a plot, I still have the ability to kind of close my eyes and still see pictures. And then it becomes a matter of putting these pictures down when I open my eyes. But I have to say that the thing about drawing these days, as opposed to drawing when I was working on a monthly book, where you work on a monthly book and you're working, I'm not saying 24/7, but kind of like, 26. You're working a really long day and you try to get a day off in there. And even sometimes you can't, and you do a half a day so you feel like a human being. Okay. I've always believed that you live, what is it? You live to work. No, you work to live. You don't live to work. And
Right.
some people, they go, oh man, I draw all day long and I love drawing. I wake up in the morning before I even go to the bathroom. I sit down and I start drawing. Hey, good for you, man. I was never like that. They say after you finish working on your page of SpiderMan, what kind of drawing did you do after that? I said, I don't do anything if I have time. What? Yeah, I want to sit down and enjoy my family, watch some TV, put my feet up, relax. Oh man,
stretch out my back and my eyes, give my eyes a rest.
Right. They said, do you paint? I said, yes, every 5 years. I want to refresh the room and I just get out of town and move things around. That's how I paint. Okay. No, but to be honest with you, that question about painting, I feel at this point in my life, I call myself, I work in part-time. I don't like to use the word semi-retired. Retired sort of feels like I'm not doing anything, but semi just doesn't cover it. So, I work on projects that come my way. I do more commissions now than I ever did before at home.
You were busy at Terrificon.
Oh my God, Terrificon was crazy. But I think it was the same at MegaCon 2 weeks later. The kids, the fans, everybody saved up their money for a year and a half because of the pandemic. And they were just dying to get out. And they were spending their money. And I met a lot of new people again that just wanted to have something drawn by me.
That young 19-year-old girl, Michaela.
Yes.
I thought she was a family member of yours. She was sitting with you. She's a big Ghost Rider fan.
Oh my gosh!
She got a bunch of commissions from you.
Yeah, no, she got 2 pieces from me, and then she posted she got a piece from Michael Golden around the corner from me.
Yeah.
She was going to anybody and everybody. She goes, "Oh yeah." I said, "Well, are you in school?" She goes, "I think she's still in school, and she also works, but she says she saves up her money to satisfy her, Ghost Rider thing going." Okay, so, hey, everybody's got something that keeps them going, and that's great.
But I thought it was great that she's 19 and she was going for all the classic and legendary, illustrators of the industry. She wasn't going for the hot flavor of the month. She was going for guys like you that really, rooted in the history of comics. So I thought that was pretty cool that a 19-year-old did that. Give me a little hope. she was sitting and talking with me and Howard Mackey, and she was sitting with you, and like you said, Michael Golden, and it's just good to see that, and Scott Hanna, and
Right. I wanted to finish answering the question that the other gentleman had about inspiration from outside from comics. Do you mean, do I look at other comics for inspiration, or do I just look at certain environmental situations?
I think you meant any other situation,
Anything
environmental,
else?
and
Well,
yeah,
for example, yeah, I mean, I enjoy movies. When it comes to storytelling, gosh, if you watch some really great movies, the way you just basically dissect the movies for storytelling, for each shot can be a panel of art. If
right,
you want to look, if you want to get an unbelievable lesson in storytelling, in a nutshell, there's a book that Joe Kubert drew. Oh, I guess probably over a decade ago. I don't even remember when he passed away, but the way time flies, it could be almost a decade. But he did this book for a character called Tex. It's a Western, and the character is very popular in Italy. And I got some backstory on it where I found out that it took him a number of years to put this together, where he had told the editor publisher, listen, at one point, I think you should maybe let somebody else redo this story or have somebody else finish it because I'm just taking way too long. And the guy said, no, 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 no. Take your time. I want you, and I want you to finish it and do what, get it done when you get it done. And when you look at it and you feel like, and you hear that, wow, he probably took 6 years or something to draw this book. It's as consistent from page one as it is to the last page in the book. And it is an absolute lesson in storytelling and staging. And, one of the things that I was starting to hit upon earlier was, as far as inspiration, one of the things is that if you've watched enough movies and you've looked at enough great storytellers that are out there in my generation, guys like Jack Kirby and Alex Toth and John Romita and Gil Kane. And, I don't want to leave anybody out, but there's a list of others, and even guys more contemporary. I would say one of my favorites for inspiration is Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. Besides, Joe Kubert. When I say storytelling, there are many choices when you first read a script in terms of how do you want to start it. Do you want to start with a long shot, and then you want to zoom into a close up? Do you want to do a bird's eye view? Do you want to do a worm's eye view? You want to do a medium shot? There are enough choices where sometimes in the past, when I used to really be able to crank a monthly book, those choices would come to me right away, and I'd be able to do 4 or 5 panels in a row. It would just somehow happen. And now that I don't do it as much, when I sit down, I have if there's 4 or 5 panels, I have about 8 or 9 choices as to, okay, so which ones are going to be the best ones to portray this the way I really want to, for it to be effective,
So who would be your Mount Rushmore of comic book artists?
My 4 best. Oh, wow. Well, let's see. I'll start off from when I was a kid. All right. Dick Sprang doing Batman was probably, the best for me. Okay. And I'm in that same breath, I'm going to say Dick Sprang on Batman and Wayne Boring on Superman. They take up one spot because that was my little kid thing. Then after that, I would have to say I really fell in love with Gil Kane's work when he was doing, the Atom, Green Lantern, all that stuff. I mean, let's see. I was in the 3rd grade, I think. 3rd? Yeah. I was 8 years old in 1960 when Green Lantern #1 came out. And I remember we were able to, in the final week of school, we were able to bring in as many comics as we could handle and then trade with the other buddies in the row, okay? And I remember I had a school bag full of comics. And I can't remember what it is I traded for Green Lantern #1, but I got Green Lantern #1. And I think I had found out about him probably from getting Justice League of America #4. and he was in that book too. And so all of a sudden you've got, wow, there's the Flash and Green Lantern. And I just, as a kid, I just fell in love with all these guys to the point where now I've got, you're looking at 1960, 61. So I'm following Superman and Batman, Green Lantern, the Flash. I mean, Aquaman was in the back of Adventure Comics, drawn by Ramona Fradon. Another artist who's in.
She just turned 95, God bless her.
Yes, and she looks great, and she's still cranking out some cool stuff.
Wonderfully, yeah.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the chapter that I'm working on, I think the book, that the cover of the book with the chapter that I'm working on, Ramona Fradon drew the cover for that book. And
I actually want to get her to do an homage to Wonder Woman on my book.
Oh, cool!
Cover. Yeah, I want to reach out. Catskill. She's by Catskill.
Scott Kress. Yeah. He's got Ramona there. Yeah, that's cool. And so those two guys are in the first spot, and then I got Gil Kane. After that, oh man, geez, the top four. It's so hard because once I got to read my first introduction to Marvel was, I remember coming home from school on a Friday, and a friend of mine was with me, and I said, hey, let's go see what new comics came out this week. So we go into the store, and no new DCs came out that Thursday. And but he goes, hey, you should read these guys. And I said, what's this? And it was Fantastic Four number 18, where they were fighting the Super Skrull. And it was Amazing Spider-Man number 5, where he was fighting Dr. Doom. And I said, geez, I don't know anything about these guys. And he goes, well, Spider-Man's a young kid. I said, a kid? Why does he call him Spider-Man? Well, that's because that's what they do. Okay, he's 16, and he's lived with his aunt, and he can't pay rent, and they're like almost going to get evicted from their apartment. I said, really? I mean, God, everybody at DC has they're making $100,000 a year. I mean, Clark Kent's a reporter, and Bruce Wayne is independently wealthy, sits around in a bathrobe and smokes pipes, waits for the bat signal. I mean, gosh, Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, he's a test pilot, so he's doing okay. The Flash he's in a police lab.
Yeah, right.
Everybody's got a good job, probably with a pension and stuff. And here's Peter, he's scrounging around, where I was bringing back soda bottles and soda cans to get money together for comics. He's bringing that stuff back so that they can pay their rent, for Pete's sake.
But that was his charm, and that's why people loved him.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was so cool. And, I found out about, my big thing was always about origins and about finding out about what kind of powers they had. So I kind of got to the powers thing. I can't remember if they did the so-called happy recap of his origin in number 5, but I found out soon enough, probably because I went to the next store on the way home, and for some reason or other, they hadn't done returns yet. And there was Amazing number 4 with the Sandman. So in the same day, I got FF18, Sandman, 4 and 5 on.
You don't still have these books, do you?
No, I got well, that's a whole nother story why I don't have them. But at any rate, it's not like I got rid of them. They were stolen from my parents' basement by one of their tenants when we went on a vacation.
I hope they get gonorrhea.
Good one. But they must have taken. I think the guy stole like 200 comics of mine.
Oh man.
And in its place, I was probably 13 at the time, and my brother was 16 or 12 and 15. But in the place of the comic books, he left us 14 issues of Playboy magazine.
So you just wanted to read the articles.
I was annoyed. Like, the guy freaking stole my comics. My brother at 16 was going, yeah, but look what he left us. He left us Playboy. So I mean, I was annoyed. But yeah, I never had a whole run of Amazing, but I had a lot of the early issues in the single digits. Like I said, I had 4, 5. I bought 6. I had 7, 8. Yeah, I just bought all those things off the newsstand. I got Amazing number 1, which I still have, by going to there was a store across the street. Well, in the old days, we called them candy stores. They were luncheonettes. They had a spinner rack. Yeah, but this candy store had a bin in the back where they sold only old comics. And comics were 10 and 12 cents, but they were selling them for a nickel. If you wanted to sell them comics, they'd give you 2 cents a piece. but they sold them for a nickel. So I remember going back there. I would always go to church on Sunday morning with an extra quarter in my pocket. Somehow I managed that. And I remember getting Amazing Spider-Man #1 for a nickel. I still have it. You know, it wasn't in the best. It wasn't in the. I'd say right now, if I got it graded, if I got a 3.0, I'd probably be happy. But it's intact. You know,
Amazing #1.
It doesn't look like anybody took a bite out of it, so it's wrapped up in plastic, and so I'm good. And I still have. I mean, I was able to buy X-Men and Avengers and Daredevil #1 right off the newsstands.
Wow.
I still have those books. Okay. So, and again, I read them on the table, just opened them up flat. But still, you keep doing that, and you're going to have a million nicks in the spine, which is where the graders love to look, so they can say, oh, yeah, this book looks good, but look, if we look at it with the microscope, I mean, damn. But I don't care. I have the books, you know, which is kind of
cool. I'm not into grading. I have almost the entire collection of Uncanny X-Men. I'm missing like 30 issues in the first 60. Actually, most of those issues are the reprints that they did from 67 on. But I'm not into grading personally. I don't want my book in a coffin. If I can't open it and look at it, what the hell's the sense?
But you know, my buddy Graham Nolan, he goes to conventions and he wants to fill up his collection. And from what I understand, he's bought books that were graded and he opened up the grading thing. He goes,
did he crack them?
You bought it graded? And he goes, no, I didn't buy it. I traded artwork for it, or a sketch or something like that, or some compound sketch, I guess.
And he cracks them open. Good for him.
He cracked them open. He goes, I wanted to read it. Yeah, but there's Masterworks, and then he goes, you got to read the original book, you know?
Yes, on the original newsprint. Yeah, absolutely. Robert Manning wanted to ask you, so how did Flash come about? How'd you get hired for Flash, and was it a character you always wanted to draw?
Okay, well, before the Flash, I got hired to do Green Lantern. That was my first big gig. Okay, when I got to DC Comics, how I got to DC Comics, when I was at the School of Visual Arts in New York City, where I studied with Will Eisner. I was there for a couple of years. I didn't graduate, didn't get a degree, but I got out after the first 2 years. I started working on my portfolio, and I put my own little fanzine together. For anybody who doesn't know, a fanzine is just like, well, it's basically an indie comic, okay?
Right.
Yeah, so I remember comics at the time were selling for, I think, 35 cents, and I was charging 40 cents for mine. It had 20 pages of art. And at any rate, are you familiar with the name Phil Suling?
No.
Oh, Phil Suling. Well, let's see. Bud Plant was the distributor, the big distributor on the West Coast for comics, and his counterpart was Phil Suling on the East Coast. So Phil was, I guess, before Diamond Comics, there was Phil Suling and Bud Plant.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And so at any rate, I sent one of my books to Bud Plant. He bought 500 copies. So I had to go back to the printer, print up more copies, brought it to his house, unbelievable house with all the original artwork that was on his walls. I'm just going to say he had an original Prince Valiant page that was something like, 4 feet by 2.5 feet. That's how big this thing was. It was crazy. Each of those panels are something like 12 or 13 inches by 12 or 13 inches. So at any rate, and he had Alex Toth and Will Eisner and Gil Kane and some of the other guys from Lou Fine from the 40s. Unbelievable stuff. But at any rate, about a month later, he was running one of the first New York Comic Cons. Okay, the Phil Suling New York show. He was basically the grandfather.
Oh, you know what? Someone told me about. Yeah, I heard about him. That's right. Okay.
Yeah, he started those comic book conventions, and so I went, and it was a Saturday before Easter. I think he used to call it the Eastercon. And I went by myself, and I passed by his table, and I wanted to see if he had my book out there, and he did. And I asked him how it was doing, and he said, yeah, people are, picking up on it. He says, seems to be, they have some interest going. I said, okay, great, thank you. I left him to his whatever it was doing, and I walked the floor, and a half an hour later, I was paged back to his table. And so I go, and I see this little old man in a shirt and a tie, looking through my magazine, and he had a big smile on his face as he was thumbing through it. And I walk up and I say, Phil, what's going on? He goes, Alex, I want you to meet Saul Harrison, president of DC Comics. And so we start a conversation. He goes, oh, pleased to meet you. He says, hey, are you working? I said, well, no. He says, how would you like to work for DC Comics? And that's how I got it. Okay.
That's amazing.
This was a Saturday. He goes, listen, protocol dictates that you call up Vince Coletta on Monday. He's the art director. Make an appointment with him. But I'm going to let him know that, you're in. You just have to kind of meet up with him. I said, okay, fine. So I did that. I went in on that Wednesday, and I left. I got to meet Paul Levitz and Joe Orlando, and I left with a one-page House of Mystery story to draw. That was almost like a training ground for me to work with somebody else's words, so to speak. It was only 6 panels. And, I did that and brought it in a couple or 3 days later. And I got a 7-page science fiction story to draw, which was the only time that I got to work with Bob Layton at the time. That's how I met Bob. And we worked on that. And he liked my work because he says, wow, it has like a Gil Kane feel to it. I said, yeah, really big Gil Kane fan. And then I did about maybe 3 things more, 2 mystery things, 1 little war story. And then when I was bringing in that last 2-page mystery story, Vince Coletta calls me in and he goes, hey, kid, how would you like to draw Green Lantern? And I said, really? He says, yeah. I said, what happened to Mike Grell? He says, don't worry about Mike. He's working on some other stuff, but we need somebody to draw Green Lantern. I told Julie all about you, Julie Schwartz, the editor of Green Lantern. Oh,
wow, yeah.
So I go into the office. I get to meet Julie, and Vince is right behind me, and he goes, hey, Julie, this is the kid I was talking to you about. He's better than Gil Kane. I said, whoa.
Wow.
Julie goes, what makes you think you can draw Green Lantern? I said, well, first of all, I don't think I'm better than Gil Kane, but I really love his work. I'm a big fan. And I love the character. And I said, I'd love to work on Green Lantern. And he goes, well, do me a couple of pages of samples on how you would draw the character so I can see what kind of a feel you have. So I went back home and I basically just, drew a bunch of poses on a big page and on a second big page. And the second page actually was just Green Lantern making a construct of a boxing glove, punching Sinestro like across the panel. Okay. So, because I figured, well, I'm just, how many poses of Green Lantern can I draw on one page? And why would I do a second page? So at any rate, I brought those in. He looked them over. I said I should go sit in the bullpen area while he does that, and called me in. Somebody called me in 10 minutes later, and he goes, okay, so here's your first script. It's by Denny O'Neil. And I'm thinking, holy crap, I'm working on Denny O'Neil. But Denny had been writing it all along for Neil Adams, then for Mike Grell. So he was just continuing. But, it was such a pleasure to work on Denny's stuff because his art directions were sparse. His dialogue was not too heavy, so he gave you room to draw. And because some of these guys that were writing these 4- and 5-page stories, they were really 12-page stories condensed into 4 or 5, and there would be 7- and 8-panel pages with captions and, art directions. Well, in the foreground, we're doing this. In the background, these guys are coming in. And in the middle ground,
and it's all covered up by word bubbles.
Yeah, so then after I would basically, I think the word that we used in the past was Greeking in the lettering. I Greeked it in. I'm going, I got 1/3 of a panel left to draw in, and they want all this stuff. What the heck's going on? But Denny was concise, just like a 5-6 letter line, maybe 2 lines.
Well, he believed in making sure that the art told the story just as much as the dialogue.
I mean, when Will Eisner was teaching us, in the school, he said, hey, good storytelling does not really need words. The words are there to enhance the story, not repeat what you're drawing. So if somebody's walking down the street and the caption says, as Joe was walking down the street, well, we know he is.
Unless we didn't part of the problem with some indie books. The writers do that stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, other than the fact that
you don't need the Morgan Freeman narration. This is not Wormhole,
I mean, other than the fact that we don't know who Joe is, that caption doesn't really tell us too much, right? So, at any rate, so Denny really gave us room to draw. Sometimes there'd be 4-panel pages where you could get a big shot in there of something. As Dick Giordano used to say, the money shot.
Right.
get like a big thing. But as long as you can have big panels in your stories, as long as you still do not sacrifice storytelling in the remaining 3 or 4 panels that
Right.
maybe frame that big splash that you wanted to draw, just for whatever effect. I mean, a cool thing, whatever. I don't know. I mean, I remember when I was, when I was a kid, and I was looking at one of my other Mount Rushmore guys that inspired me, Jack Kirby. Okay, God, when Jack would give us a big, there was I think Thor number 112 where he fought the Hulk again, and it was inked by Chick Stone, and it looked glorious. And there was some half-page panels in there where the two of them were going at it. Oh man, I mean, how old am I? Like 11 years old, looking at this stuff, just drooling, eyes popping out of my head. That's probably why I needed glasses after a while, because my eyes kept popping out of my head. I finally needed glasses by the time I was 13.
Randy says he's looking forward to seeing you in Baltimore Saturday. Randy, I have to cancel, so I won't be able to make it. But so Randy Funk is a big art collector, and he will be coming to see you, I'm sure.
Okay, yeah, I'll be bringing all kinds of stuff with me. SpiderMan Sunday pages, SpiderMan dailies, interior pages. I may even slip a couple of covers in there, splash pages.
Nice.
So, hey.
Now, I wanted to ask you, and Keith has a question, but I'll expound upon it with Keith. I mean, how was it? I mean, it seems like you really had this like angel on your shoulder, because you got into these big characters. I mean, these were the mainstream, golden tickets, and then you go to Marvel and it's, hey, you want to draw Spider-Man? So
No,
you
how
get on
that
web with
worked-
Spider-Man.
Okay, well, here's how that worked with Marvel. When I was living on Long Island, I was living in a town. The town there were maybe 3-4 towns that basically sent all their kids to one particular high school. I lived in the town right next to the Ramitas. Okay, I happened to go to high school with John Romita Sr. He's 4 years younger than I am to the day.
He lives about 20 minutes from me.
Oh, where are you?
Bayport.
Oh yeah, okay. So he's still on the island now. Okay.
Yeah, and Billy Tucci's 5 blocks
Billy's
from me.
Billy's
Yeah, they're all over here. Scott Snyder's here. Yeah.
I know Billy's been there for ages, but John had been around and about, the country.
Yeah, he just came back after he left and came back.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at any rate, John, it wasn't John Jr. so much. I was 17 at the time, and John Jr. was 13, but his oldest brother was a year younger than me, and we belonged to like a National Honor Society together in the, in the high school. And one of my best friends who wasn't in the Honor Society goes, hey, that's that guy, his last name's Romita. He says, that's his father's John Romita, draws Spider-Man. I said, really? It's not just a common coincidence? He goes, oh no, his father. You want me to introduce you? I said, I don't want to be imposing, I mean, I'll get to, I'll get to talk to him eventually. Actually, it was the older brother who then came to me, he saw that I was drawing something or whatever. And he goes, hey, I see that you're into art. He goes, my father's John Romita. He draws Spider-Man. I said, oh yeah, I know. He goes, would you like to meet him? I said, really? Wow, that would be great. So I got to meet John Romita Sr. at their house. I took my bike over there. That's how close we were, like a mile away. And gosh, it's really funny how relative time is, because I think back at that meeting, and I've mentioned this to some other people. I said, I was 17, and John Romita Sr. was 39. And now I'm 69. John, I think, is 91 or 92. My son lives with us, and he's 39. And I'm thinking, wow, John Romita was 39. But boy,
Crazy,
we went in. Well, when you're 17, somebody who's 39 is going to be like your dad, So at any rate, I got into his studio. He brought me into his studio, and he was just starting to follow Jack Kirby on the FF. He had a page or two of Fantastic Four number 103 on his table. Okay. And if you can remember that first issue, it was this, he had the page. And again, I think I started doing the blue pencil thing because that's what John was doing. He would lay his page out in blue pencil, then graphite on top of it. And that one page that stuck out to me was the one where the FF were looking up at their big monitor, and Richard Nixon was in the monitor. Okay. And so I said, oh, wow. So when I saw that, and then the page next to that on his drawing table was an amazing Spider-Man page that was penciled by Gil Kane that he was inking. So now you can imagine, even as a teenager, I'm sitting there, and even though I was wearing glasses, my eyes were still popping out of my head. And we talked, and he gave me pointers and stuff, and just always mentioned how difficult it was. The life of a freelance comic book artist was very difficult because the pay wasn't great. You had to put in long hours. You had to really be committed and passionate about your work. And I said, okay, basically. And, so at any rate, what happened was for me to get to Marvel back in, I guess I was working on Superman stuff. I did Green Lantern initially, just to answer that question. And then at this, maybe, I'm trying to remember, 4 months into my Green Lantern tenure or 5 months, Paul Levitz, the freelance coordinator, comes in and he goes, hey, we need somebody to draw the Flash. And I said, oh, really? So you want me to draw the Flash instead of Green Lantern? Oh, no, we'd like you to do both. And I'm thinking, wow.
So sleep's not necessary, but this is cool.
Oh, what'd you say?
Sleep is not necessary, but this is cool.
No problem. Sure. At the time, the lead features were 17 pages. So I said, 34 pages. Okay, a page and a wink a month. Yeah, I should be able to do that. Well, I managed to only do 7 issues of the Flash. But after the first 2 or 3, I was really starting to slow up. And they took Green Lantern away and they gave it to Joe Staton. And I think they had 3 issues of fill-ins by Don Heck at the time also, which I look back at those. And Don was one of my favorite artists also. But they were really cool looking. And then Joe got to do Green Lantern. And I kept working on the Flash. But one of the reasons, as much as I liked the Flash when I was a kid, I mean, Green Lantern was probably my favorite. However, the Flash at the time was being edited by Ross Andru, who had come over from Marvel. And I guess, again, as a freelancer, you work on the editorial staff. Now you got benefits, you got vacation, you got 401k. And I guess Ross just figured, hey, you know what? I might as well take advantage of this if they want to give me an editorship. And that's what he did. Now, he was still designing all their covers, so he was making freelance money just on doing cover sketches, penciling covers, and his salary. So he was pretty happy. But he was a great mentor. I mean, I learned so much from working with him on those 7 issues. And the only reason I even left was because around the time of my 6th issue, I was getting some really huge advertising jobs that paid tremendous amount of money. And I had gotten an advertising agent, and he was going to get me all this stuff. And so I was in the middle of doing all this stuff when I just said, I went to Joe Orlando and I said, look, I can't draw the Flash anymore. He goes, oh, you're kidding. How come? And I explained it to him, and he says, wow. He says, okay, well, good luck. He says, we were just about to give you a raise. You're doing really good work. And, if things slow up, just, come back and let us know. So, of course, things did slow up. But by the time I came back, the Flash was being drawn by Don Heck. Green Lantern was in the hands of Joe Staton. And I ended up going back to Julie Schwartz and working on Superman family stories, Jimmy Olsen, Lois Lane. Eventually, my first Superman story was a DC Presents number 46, Superman and the Global Guardians. And that was a great book because I got to draw Superman and somebody new with every story. So that was kind of neat. And I was always getting different inkers. I got to work with Dennis Jensen and Frank Chiaramonte and Tony DiZuniga, of all people, did Superman and the Metal Men with me. And trying to think, there was another one that was really a great, one of my fun stories was Superman with the Phantom Stranger and the Joker. And it sounds like a ridiculous combination, but boy, it was a lot of fun. Paul Kupperberg wrote a really great story, and it was just so much fun to draw. And so at any rate, what happened was I was working on Superman then from around 1982 to at the end of 85. I guess I found out that Superman books the DC books in general were losing sales. Superman is one of the flagship titles, and I think it wasn't even breaking even. So the publisher at the time, Jeanette Kahn, Dick Giordano was the freelance coordinator. Joe Orlando was a VP. They all took the Superman guys out to a lunch. And we just thought, oh, wow, they're going to probably praise us for doing good work, etc. As it turns out, they gave us the praise. However, they also said, well, because Superman books are selling so poorly, we're going to come in with new creative teams. And that was the time where they brought in Marv Wolfman to write, and John Byrne to write, and John Byrne to draw, and Jerry Ordway, and, you know, all those guys were revamping Superman. But they said, you know, we'll give you guys will have work, no problem. That's probably why you ended up seeing, you know, what's his name, Kurt Swan doing Batman, and Kurt Swan doing Aquaman. They were keeping Kurt busy. Right. And for me, when I asked them, I said, well, what do you have for me? When I turned in my last Superman story in, I think, early February of 1986, they said, oh, well, we don't have anything else right now, but, you know, we'll stay by your phone. We'll get something going to you. And I said, oh, okay. And I just left there and I said, wow. I mean, at the time I was family man. I already had a son and had to support my family. And I just called up John Romita. And I said, John, listen, DC doesn't have any more work for me. How come? Well, and I explained it to him and he says, well, come on over. He says, we need fill-ins all the time. You could make a living doing fill-ins here because these guys are so bad with their deadlines that, you know, the faster you can draw, the more money you'll make. I said, okay, I'm coming right over. So I walked across town in New York City, got to the Marvel offices, met with John Romita. All I had with me was the Xeroxes of my last Superman job that I had done for Julie Schwartz, which eventually got inked by Kurt Schaffenberger, which was always fun to see him on top of my work. And yeah, I left those pencils there. And that was I think, must have been I think it was a Monday or a Tuesday. At any rate, by 2 days later, I got a phone call from Marvel, this editor named Michael Higgins, who was working on Jim Shooter's New Universe, needed a fill-in on an Iron Man book, which was being drawn by Mark Bright at the time. But I guess Mark was working on some other project, and so they needed a fill-in. So I went over there, I did Iron Man. And they said, hey, it was kind of neat because they said, well, what's your rate at DC? So I told them, and they said, well, nobody makes that. We're going to give you a raise. Oh, okay, cool. So right off the bat, I got a raise by just going to Marvel. And then after I did that, I mean, they kept me busy. They had me doing covers and special projects. And at one point, I think shortly into that 86 tenure, maybe a month or two in, Michael Higgins, who was and I guess he was a writer or editor for the New Universe, he says, hey, listen, Jim Shooter needs somebody to fill in on his Star Brand book. I said, oh, really? I said, okay. He says, well, I just got to warn you because Jim Shooter is really difficult to work with. I mean, you know, he likes things done a certain way. And, you know, I said, hey, no problem. I said, I've been in the business at the time. I said, I've been in the business like 9 years. I know what I'm doing. If he wants something done a particular way and he's signing my check, I'll do it his way. I don't care. Because I always felt like the thing is that as much as people want to be as creative as possible in the comic book industry, it is still a business. Okay. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they can cater to these guys who are a little bit offbeat, but for the most part, we're meeting deadlines. It's a commercial product that's out in the stores every single month. So you want it done a certain way. It's like with advertising. If they want to change, the thing in advertising, if they approve something, then they want to change it, well, then they pay for the changes. In comics, they approve something, then they change it. You go, okay, how much am I going to get paid? Oh, no, you're not getting paid until we accept it the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
Okay. So at any rate, so I met with the interesting thing about going into Jim Shooter's office was Mike says, go in, you can stay in Jim's office until he gets back from his meeting. He should be there in about 10, 15 minutes. I said, I don't have to go in. He goes, no, you can wait in his office. So I walk in, and there's this respectable gentleman standing at the desk over some artwork, and I look at it, and I recognize it's Steve Ditko's artwork. And the guy standing there was Steve Ditko.
Oh, wow.
So And you know how I recognize them? It's funny because if you ever saw the first Amazing Spider-Man annual, there was a 5-page story in the back, how Stan Lee and Steve Ditko create Spider-Man. And Steve looked exactly like the way he depicted himself in
Oh, really?
with the round glasses and his
Yeah.
hair slicked back. And I'm going, oh, are you Steve Ditko? He goes, yes, I am. I said, hi, I'm Alex Saviuk, big fan, etc. Little fanboy in me came out. And he goes, oh, nice to meet you. And that was it. It was very short and sweet. And then, and you know, he had his pages that I guess he was still looking over. And then Jim walks in and he goes, hey, Alex, yeah, okay. Yeah, Steve was just leaving. You met Steve, right? I said, yes, I did, very much. He goes, okay. Steve goes, so long. That was it. And then Jim says, okay, listen, here's and he was very cordial. I mean, I had never had any problems with Jim Shooter. But I guess, you know what, people that give other people problems are the ones that somehow don't know how to adapt. I guess, considering that everybody we know, we all have different personalities, and sometimes personalities clash. You know, I'm just a very easygoing guy, and I just feel like, okay, yeah, no problem, I'll roll with the punches. So
I've
at any
had a
rate,
few people tell me that Shooter was hard to work with the
yes,
job, but outside the job, he's the nicest guy in the world. And anytime I've spoken to him, and I just saw him at New York Comic Con, he's really
yeah.
nice.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, somebody sent me a picture. One of my buddies sent me a picture of Al Milgram, Jim Shooter, and themselves. They were in the middle, and they sent me a picture, and they said they missed you. They wanted to know where you were. So I said, well, you know, safety protocols. And so Al Milgram writes back. He goes, "Gee, you're a big wuss." And I said,
meanwhile,
no. I said safety first, you know. So,
meanwhile,
and I
Jim
went,
Shooter's like 9 feet tall, so I don't think anything affects him up there in the stratosphere.
oh,
He's a tall
well,
dude.
yes, he is. I know he's at least 6'6" or 7.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's a big guy.
yeah. So at any rate, so Jim says, he goes, look, here's my plot, because we were working at Marvel. Everybody still worked the so-called Marvel / Stan Lee way, where you get a plot, you don't get dialogue. You might have hints of dialogue, and everybody, again, just like personalities differ, everybody has different ways of giving you a plot as an
Right.
artist, writer. So Jim's, Jerry Conway, when I worked with him on web, he would give you a page by page description of what was in the story. It was up to me to decide how many panels I wanted to use. Howard Mackey, he would give me a splash page, and then the next 3 pages, it would say pages 2 through 4. And it would be like 2 typewritten pages, and it was up to me to, again, figure out how am I going to break this up into 3 pages. I can do this, I can do this in 12 panels. I can do it in 14.
Howard's a great guy, though. I really like
Oh,
Howard.
fabulous guy. I think I might have had probably the most fun working on web when I worked with Howard. And then Jim gave me a short story. I mean, literally, it was written like a big narrative short story. And so he goes, well, he says, here's my plot. He says, take it home, do thumbnails. He says, usually most artists who work with me the first time will come back and take my 22-page story and turn it into 28 or 29 pages. He says, don't worry about it. Once you bring those thumbnails in, we'll go through it. We'll edit it, weed it out, the whole thing. Then you can go back and pencil it. I said, sure, no problem. So I was taking I was taking the Long Island Railroad home because at the time I lived in Stewart Manor, okay? And so I figured, okay, let me go through this and see what happens. So I on the first read, the last paragraph in the story was page 22 because I'd make breaks in the margin. And I said, oh, well, there you go, 22 pages. So I went home and I did a Neil Adams thing where on 6x9 borders, I penciled the whole thing out pretty tightly, because I figured, okay, I think I've got down what he wants. It's 22 pages. I probably won't have to change too much, if anything. I felt confident. And so I kept it tight because I figured, hey, if he approves this, I go home, blow it up, light box it, bam, easy gig, okay? So I went in, and he looked at it, and he was very impressed. Even to the point where he says, this one section here, I think we can go further with this. I want you to put in this big giant panel, because Starbrand was going up to the moon. And so he wanted this really big panel of a sort of like a panoramic moonscape and a little tiny Starbrand to give you the whole scope, the vastness of space, the whole 9 yards, plus some of the other panel sequences that I had to get in there, which was, let's say, 9-panel page. We ended up turning it into like a 5-panel page and then another 5-panel type situation. So we were able to get an extra 2 pages out of that. And he got on the phone, he goes, and he was calling up, I guess, advertising. He goes, guys, listen, shooter, Star Brand 3, I need 2 more pages. Okay? Okay. Hung up. That was it. That's all he did was make that one phone call. So I went home, and with the adjustments, I penciled the story, brought it in. He happened not to be in the office that day, but the other editor, Mike Higgins, looked it over. He goes, yeah, I think he's going to like this. And so, again, I'm taking Long Island Railroad home, get in. My wife says, this is before cell phones. Okay. So my wife says, hey, listen, Jim Shooter's office called while you were coming home. I said, really? I was just there. What's the deal? She goes, I have no idea. You should call him back. I did. And Mike Higgins, the editor, says, hey, Jim Shooter really loved what you did, so much so that he wants to give you at the time, $15 raise, which was unimaginable to get that much money in a raise. Because at DC, I was getting like $2, $3, that kind of stuff. When I got to Marvel, I said they gave me a raise. They gave me $10 right off the bat. Wow. And now, 2 months later, I'm getting another $15 on top of the 10. I felt like, holy crap, this is like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So he goes, yeah, we want to keep you here. So he's giving me a $15 raise. And that's all she wrote. So at the time when I guess word got out that I was doing that. And DC, they were calling me up and they said, oh, we have a great story for you to do. I think it was something like Jonah Hex in the apocalyptic future. And I'm thinking, why the heck would they send Jonah Hex into the future, hanging out with, Mighty Samson type environments, from Gold Key. And I just didn't want to do it. I think, if anything, I think the writer was going to be Steve Gerber. And he even called me up and he goes, Alex, listen, they're telling me that, you'd be into doing this story with me. And I said, Steve, I'm a 1 book a month guy. I said, I'm working at Marvel. They're treating me real good. I said, I can't do a second book at DC. It's just, I'd be shortchanging Marvel, I'd be shortchanging you, and I'd be shortchanging myself. So I said, I can't do it. But hey, thanks anyway for thinking of me, et cetera, et cetera. And that was the last time I pretty much that I was, dealing with DC Comics. And I stayed at Marvel then, and within a couple of months, then there was I was working on Defenders of the Earth, which was Flash Gordon and Phantom, Mandrake. There were 4 issues of that. While I was working on the 5th issue, Jim Salicrup, the editor of SpiderMan, calls me up and he goes, hey, would you like to do a fill-in? I need a fill-in on Amazing Spider-Man. And I said, oh, wow, Jim. I said, to be honest with you, I'm in the middle of working on this Defenders of the Earth book. And the last one they gave me, the writer gave me 6 pages of fairly dense plot material. But then they said, okay, well, here's the next 16 pages. And they gave me a paragraph. And I had to kind of tell the whole story from that paragraph. Wow. Okay. So all of a sudden I'm thinking, wow, this is the Stan Lee method. He would just give you a couple of sentences and you got to go home and write it. As a matter of fact, John Romita Sr., just to go off tangent here a little bit, he said that at one point he says, I can draw as quickly as John Buscema. He says, and Jack Kirby, he says, but the thing that they have over me is they can tell a story much faster than I can. He says, I struggle to get 1 page a day in to tell the story.
They also did very rough pencils that the inkers were rendering. I mean, that's how you do 10 books in a month. John Buscema.
Well, Jack's pencils in those days.
No, I mean John.
Oh, well, John B., when I did a tour of Marvel back in, I think, 1970, John was there for about, maybe 6 months, and he had just turned in the 3rd issue of Thor that he had penciled, that Joe Sinnott was inking. And, of course, Joe Sinnott is Joe Sinnott. But, boy, those pencils were beautiful. Everything was there. There were no breakdowns. And John could draw 3 pages of full pencils a day in 10 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, his day started at 7 and he finished at 5. I remember reading an interview and he goes, in between there, he says, I draw 3 pages. Then I
Wow.
stopped. But that was his religious. That was his thing. He did 10 hours, hour for
Real,
lunch.
real quick, Randy, 35 to 116, I believe you drew, right, Alex?
That's it. And
35.
also in between there, I think issues 51, 2, and 3, I only drew the covers because they had me drawing the Parallel Lives graphic novel, which took up 3 months of my time because it was about 64 or 66 pages.
Right.
So, yeah. But in that run from 35 to 116, there were those 3 issues that I didn't draw, just did the covers. And then there were a couple of other inventory books and stuff like that that they threw in because they had them done already. And then at one point, they had 3 books done so that I could get ahead on doing some other stuff for web. I think issues, I want to say 81, 82, 83 were specifically done while I was already starting to work on this 6-issue story arc that Howard Mackey introduced called The Name of the Rose from 84 to 89, which was,
Okay.
wow, that was a really, really cool story.
He's a great writer. Real quick, hi, Steph. Thanks for coming out and sharing at the show. Appreciate it.
Hello?
So I got a two-part question for you. The first is, I mean, how was it that you're going to be on a flagship character's book? Did you feel pressure with that? And then how was it transitioning from the comic book format to the comic strip format for Spider-Man?
Okay, well, to answer the first part, I have to say that, without patting myself on the back, I didn't feel pressure at all. If I felt anything when I first started working on Spider-Man, I think what probably kept the pressure off me was that even though in Amazing Number 292, which was my first fill-in, Spider-Man was still in the black costume. And to me, as much as I knew it was Peter Parker, it wasn't really Spider-Man. I kind of went into it that way. And I also filled in on 295 and 296. Or was it 96 and 97? And again, still the black costume. And then when they got me to Web of Spider-Man filling in, the first 2 issues were fill-ins, black costume. I wasn't really on the book at that time, but number 37 was being drawn by the original artist. And then when I turned in my stuff on 36, they said, hey, would you like to do another fill? And I said, sure. They gave me 39 because they wanted to leave 38 for the other artist when he finishes 37. And I drew 39 and I brought it in. They said, would you want to do another fill-in? And I said, sure. What is it? Well, it's number 38. I said, what? I said, I thought that was supposed to be done. Nah, he just finished up 37. Holy mackerel. Wow. So I knocked out 38 in record time, like 2 weeks or something like that. And they were like, oh my God, you're done? Yeah. Well, you needed it in 2 weeks, right? Well, yeah, we figured nobody usually comes in after they say they're going to come in. That's why we need fill-ins. So at any rate, so I finished that. And then Jim says, hey, listen, I have a 4-issue arc written by Peter David called The Cult of Love, which was, wow, that was a fantastic story.
He's a great writer.
Yeah. Oh, boy. He gave me a plot, but the images that I was able to conjure up from reading his words, just so much fun to put that whole thing together. And it was funny because in the 4th issue of that book, I guess when the letter column came out, I'm reading the letter column and somebody says, hey, we really like the artwork from Alex Saviuk and Keith Williams. And are they going to be doing any more? And Jim, I think whoever answers the letter column says, oh, yeah, well, they're our regular team and you'll be seeing a lot more of them. And so
that's how you found out?
And I called up Jim immediately after that. And I said, Jim, what's the deal? I got to find out in the letter column that I'm the regular guy. He goes, well, gee, after all the fill-ins you did, I figured you'd figure out that you're the regular guy. I said, I never take anything for granted, really. I said, but if I'm the regular guy, that's awesome. In all the years that I've worked on certain projects, The one thing I always used to like when I was a kid, and you read either, I don't know if it was DC, but more it was probably Marvel, where when a new artist would come in, they'd say writer, inker, letterer, colorist, proudly welcome. And then in the big blurb, it says, Wally Wood to draw Daredevil or something like that. And I always wanted to get that big blurb that said, now penciling, regular guy. I never got the blurb,
You have to draw. You had to draw it in yourself. They expected you to draw it yourself.
Yeah, I probably should have. But if that answers your question, the next part about this going to comic book strips, well, I guess back in the day, one of the things that Jim Shooter I know liked about, let's say, the old storytelling style was that guys like Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko would do 6-panel grids. Pretty much a lot of the old school Marvel stuff. It might be 2 on top, sometimes 3 in the middle, but it was all considered to be an offshoot of a 6-panel grid. So and his theory was that if you have a 6-panel grid, it's still like looking at a TV screen, because the top third of your panel is going to be room for dialogue, and then the bottom 2/3 is your wide angle frame. And he says that's all you really need to do. You don't need to design the page, you just have to design the panel. And he kind of liked that. And so initially when I was drawing for Marvel, I basically kept that in mind, specifically when I was doing his StarBrand book, okay? I wanted to make sure that he was happy with what I was doing. And then, when it came to doing this newspaper strip, I remember I was off my contract. I wasn't working for Marvel anymore because at the time, the last 2 years that I have, 2.5 years I worked for them, I was working on the animated series Spider-Man Adventures and the Adventures of Spider-Man. And then when they canceled those books, there was nothing left for me to get from any of the other editors. So actually, I started working on the X-Files for Jim Salicrup because he had moved over to Topps. And I did that for about 1.5 years. And then after that, I couldn't get work from the big two. And so I was just so happened that around that time, Ralph Macchio, who was working at Marvel, calls me up and says, hey, listen, Stan Lee needs somebody to do the Spider-Man Sunday newspaper strip page. Would you be interested? And since I really wasn't doing all that much anymore, I said, sure. I figured I would do, at least if I do that 1 page a week, I'm keeping my hand in comics. And so, I ended up calling up his office, spoke to his secretary. He said I should just do, he said send in some comics to Stan's office. And then when I did that, they called me up and they said, Stan loves your artwork, but he really would like to see how you would handle a horizontal newspaper strip. I said, really? I said, he can't tell that I can tell a story? He goes, well, he says a newspaper strip, again, it's a horizontal format. It's restricted because, you've got the panels are all a certain size. So he'd like to see what you can do with that. I said, okay, do you have a plot for me or something? He goes, no, he wants you to make something up. I said, okay. So I did. I did a 6-panel horizontal strip of, starting off Spider-Man. And, basically J.J. Jameson is walking below him. And then in the second panel, J.J.'s walking past a couple of thugs. In the third panel, they start accosting him, okay, and harassing him. In the fourth panel, the thugs get, hit by some spider webs. They get pulled up on the lamppost. Spider-Man's there waving to JJJ. JJ, as Spider-Man's leaving, he's giving him the fist. Basically in the margin, I'm writing, you're a menace. I'm going to get you for this or something like that. No appreciation of the fact that he saved his life, or at least his money. And so I sent that page in, and then I remember waiting a couple of days and going shopping with my wife and coming home, and we still had answering machines with the little cassette tapes in those days, right?
Right.
And so I see there's a message. So I click on it, and it was Stan Lee. And he goes, hey, Alex, this is Stan Lee. I just want to tell you, I love your work. It's awesome. I would really like to work on the newspaper strip with you. Now, I got to tell you this. It doesn't pay much, but think of the glory. That's what he said to me.
That's a bad impression.
Well, thanks. I'll carry that with me until the day I go, But yeah, that was it. So then I called up and I said, well, how much does it pay? And it turned out that it paid the same amount as a regular page when I left Marvel. So I figured, well, I guess he doesn't know that that Marvel isn't paying that much, because that's what I'm getting to do this. But the thing is also is that the rate that I got was the same rate that the guys were getting in 1977 when the strip first started, because
Oh, wow.
it was in 500 or 600 or 700 newspapers throughout the world. So there was money coming in like crazy, and he could afford to pay the guys that kind of money. So people wanted to work on it. And but then what happened was also, as the sales were dwindling, and by the time I took it over in 1997 from this artist named Fred Kita, who from like an old timer guy, who Stan had basically asked to do fill-ins for him for a little while, and it turned out to be a year and a half. And finally, Fred said, "Hey, look, I saved your buns over here by filling in, but it's a year and a half. I'm retired. I don't want to keep doing this." So that's how I got the gig. And then so I got started on it. I think I was a little bit nervous. When you say pressure, now I'm working with Stan Lee. Right. So those first two Sundays I was working, I'm going, wow, this is for Stan Lee. I better be good. Oh, it's got to be good. Okay. So, and then it was being inked by Joe Sinnott, of all people.
Right.
So now it's like, wow, I'm working with
two
Stan
legends. Lee. Yeah.
Joe Sinnott, this is awesome, you know? And so I remember 3 months into the tenure on the strip, I needed to ask Joe Sinnott a question, and I got his number, called him up, and what a pleasant man. I don't know if you ever got to meet Joe Sinnott.
I did.
He was unbelievably friendly, generous. I mean, the whole bit, just a wonderful person. And I remember asking him at one point, I said, Joe, am I giving you enough like pencils so that, you know, you don't have to like work too much? Am I giving you everything you need? He goes, actually, Alex, he says, you're handcuffing me. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, you're giving me way too much information. He says, your pencils are so tight. He says, I feel so obligated to pencil every line that you put down that you don't give me anything to do. I said, oh, so what do you want me to do? Give you layouts, breakdowns? He goes, no, just loosen up. I said, you don't want me to connect the lines? He says, no. He goes, I love spotting blacks. And he says, you don't have to do all that. Give me something to do. So we had that kind of a relationship. I mean, I still gave him everything that he needed, but case in point, I would do a crowd scene. Let's say Spider-Man's up in the foreground in the strip, in the panel, and I got these tiny little heads, that tiny as I'm drawing it in let's say I'm going to say 6x5 panel or 5.5 by 5 panel, and or 4.5 or whatever it is. And I just would indicate circles with bodies. And then when he inked it, he put faces on everybody and he gave them clothes.
Nice.
And I remember him telling a buddy of mine, he goes, boy, Alex, I love his work, but boy, he's killing me with those backgrounds. And so I called him up. I said, Joe, I said, look, some artists, when they draw a crowd like that and it shrinks down, I mean, you don't need faces. He goes, no, I can't leave blank heads. I got to put faces in. I said, wow.
Well, you're the one who said not to render as much, so yeah. There you go.
So he took his little crow quill pen, gave everybody eyes, nose, and a mouth, and hair, and crazy stuff. But going back to the newspaper strip style, it was restricted. I had a horizontal motif, and every panel, there was no vertical panel when you felt like saying, okay, I want to show Spider-Man climbing up a building. You had to basically think in terms of, now this wide angle panel really was what you would see on a theater, you know, in a 16:9 ratio, where if Spider-Man in a movies is walking up the building, well, of course you have motion, your camera can follow him up the building, right? But that first shot, you're going to look up, and you could, if the crowd is looking at him walking up the building, well, that's what you get to draw. You had to kind of just rein in some of those particular angles. Right. And, you know, just make it work. And still maintain a certain amount of dynamics, because that's one thing Stan hated, was when the panels were flat and they weren't dynamic enough, you know. Right. But other than that, once I did that I guess I got used to the feeling of working with Stan. And occasionally his assistant would call me up and he goes, Stan wants to talk to you. And I'm thinking, oh crap, what did I do? And so Stan gets on the phone and he let me know that he really enjoys when the Spider-Man Sundays come in and he gets to read them over because he really enjoys the artwork and the dynamics. And how come you're not working for Marvel? I said, because they don't call me, Stan. Tell them I sent you. Call up Joe Quesada. Tell him I sent you. So I said, okay, I will. I did that, I think, 2 or 3 times. And they just, gave me a list of editors to get in touch with. And everybody said, oh, thanks, but we're really very busy giving our contract guys work now. So, keep in touch. Okay, sure. After a while, you saw that and you kept in touch. And after a while, if you have that feature on your email that lets you know if somebody just discarded your email, then you'll see, oh, wow, didn't even open the email. I just threw it out. Okay, cool. That's fine. I stopped sweating it after a while. So.
Well, I think it's a lot of the younger editors too. They want to find the new big thing as opposed to go with the
the flavor of the month. I always said my adage was to them where there were 3 times where I turned in samples back in 87, 2000, and then 2004. And each time I thought I was making adjustments to my style to sort of, I'd say, contemporize it. Look at what the other guys are doing, how they were rendering stuff. And so I wanted to incorporate that into my work. And I thought I was successful with it. And I'd get good feedback, more so from my peers that would say, wow, how come you're not working on a book? I say, well, because I sent this to the editors and they're kind of ambivalent. They're just like, it's neither here nor there. Wow, I can't believe it. This is better than some of the stuff that we're publishing. I said, well, thank you for that. But hey, it is what it is. But like I said, after I tried 3 times, I said, hey, baseball, 3 strikes, you're out. I've had it. I'm not doing this anymore. Now, some people might say, well, why are you quitting? I said, I'm not quitting. I said, I'm being realistic. They've even told, all I said would say, hey, listen, if you have 1 fill-in so I can show you what I can do, okay, that hopefully might be enough to convince you. But then I would see, I'd go to the comic book shop and look at the books that are coming in that are in my pile. And I'd see some new guy whose work I don't even like. But all of a sudden, Superman's not a handsome guy. Batman's not a handsome guy. They look kind of old and gnarly. And they'll go, yeah, but they look like real people. Hey, I don't go to the movies. I mean, the actors that Henry Cavill is a great looking guy. He doesn't look like Joe Everyman that puts on a Superman suit.
Make me Superman roll around. How's that?
Yeah. I mean, look at the guys that have played Batman. I mean, Christian Bale. When I first looked at, Michael Keaton. I never thought I'd like Michael Keaton, but he did a great job. Okay. Christian Bale, Val Kilmer. He had blonde hair. That look didn't go for me too much. Plus the fact Joel Schumacher was already directing at that point, and he kind of killed the 2 Batman movies he worked on. Okay, George Clooney looked like a good Batman, but the story stunk.
Bat nipples.
Bat nipples. Right. And George says, "Oh man, I still apologize to this day for killing the Batman franchise. You didn't kill it, George. You're the freaking script and the director killed it." Okay. And then you got Christian Bale. And at first I'm thinking, Christian Bale. And I saw him in this movie called Equilibrium. It was a science fiction movie.
Yeah, I saw that too.
And he played an action guy. And, even when he was, changing his clothes, you could see he was really all buffed out already. And I said, well, yeah, I guess I could stretch it. I could see him in a Batman costume. And so, yeah, after a while, you got used to him. And, I thought Ben Affleck made a great Bruce Wayne, and I thought he was a good Batman also. And now you got Robert Pattinson. Have you seen the new trailers on the Batman stuff?
Yeah, to me, I feel like that's going to be a good movie with a bad Batman.
You think it's a bad Batman?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not one of those that's going to go flip out before I see a movie. But just
I'm not flipping out either. I like him in the costume, but somehow
I don't think he's going to fit for me, but I do think it's going to be a good movie.
I think, again, from some of the, we'll get to see his versatility as an actor and what kind of a personality he's going to give Bruce Wayne. Now, if you look at the trailers, obviously the theme of the movie is very dark. Okay, so if he's going to just be another brooding Bruce Wayne, okay, because his parents died and he's out, and as he says, there's that scene where the crooks go, "Who are you?" And he goes, "I'm vengeance." So he's going to be out there beating the crap out of everybody that he comes in
Well,
contact.
it's because it reflects society today. Everybody's angry, everybody's pissed off, everything's dark today. I
Yes,
mean, The Boys is what everything a superhero's movie is supposed to be now. Where you're ripping
right,
heads off and
right,
Superman's a bad guy. Even
yeah.
Justice League with the Snyderverse, in my opinion, Superman was not Superman. He wasn't.
Oh no, never was, never
No,
was. In his own movies and as in the Justice League, in
right.
yeah, when it was Batman versus Superman, Henry Cavill had a knit brow throughout the entire movie. He just looked like he was about ready to cry. And I'm going, hey, come on, you're freaking Superman. What are you doing? You know? Yeah, no, Zack Snyder, I just felt like, just like you, Zack Snyder didn't get it right at all.
I mean, he gets the gritty stuff right, but not Superman. Superman to me, and I say this all the time, and I get flack for it. Superman is what we're all supposed to aspire to be, and comics used to be that for kids. The
Right,
hero that you aspired to be. Now they're trying to make so many anti-heroes and guys that cross the line, and because it's more real. And my answer is what you said. If I want real, I'll go turn on the news. If I want real, I'll go step outside my house. I go to
right.
comics because I want what I want the world to be. Good
I
guys
want,
win and they
you
act
want
right.
escapism. You want escapism. You want to
Right.
get out. Okay. I mean, you want to see fighting, sure, but you want to see I want to see the good guy win in the end. I don't want to see him, standing there in a beautiful, like dimly lit silhouette, all moody and stuff. And this is going to lead me into the next scene or the next movie. I mean,
If I want angry and annoyed, I'll go drive in the LIE.
well, oh yeah, right. Okay.
you
Yeah,
know?
we're getting overpopulation down here in Florida. Also, believe me, when I
Yeah.
drive, even at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, down some of the main strips, and I'm going, it's freaking New York City. What the heck happened?
Well,
There's
you know
so
why they
many
call
people.
it you know why they call it the LIE? Because you just lie there.
You don't have to lie there. No, you just sit in your car and wait.
Yeah, really.
You know? I've never
Um,
been when I lived up there. I've never been to the Hamptons, and I think one of the main deterrents was don't even try.
it gets to be a single road. I have to go see
That's
patients
right.
out there, and then
When it gets to
it's
be a single
murder.
road, it's
Two
freaking
hours on
murder.
that road.
Yeah. I mean, you want to go up there. Are you into the brawler or the detective type of Batman? Oh, I am into the detective type of Batman. I
I knew
mean,
you'd say that because of the book you want to write.
that's what I grew up on. And even, gosh, back in I was going to say in the Neil Adams and Dick Giordano days of Batman. I mean, yeah, he fought guys. Ra's al Ghul came out, and that was his big nemesis. But I don't. I think he still had to use quite a bit of his detective abilities, to get into these cases and stuff. He's not. He didn't just throw that away because he wanted to beat people up. No, Batman. I mean, gosh, some of those early Batman annuals when I was a kid. You see these stories, the case files of Batman, and you see Dick Sprang drawing there with all these files and stuff like that, and they're looking them over.
Yep.
Now it's all digital, of course, but I'm just saying, Batman was the detective. That's how he fought these guys. He outwitted them.
Detective Comics.
Yes. Why do they call it
That's
Detective Comics?
exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up for the night, I always ask this question of all my guests.
Okay.
If you could go back to when you were first starting out in the industry, knowing what you know now with the experience, the wisdom that you've accumulated, what would you tell your younger self?
I would tell my younger self. I love this question, but okay. I would tell my younger self to stay in college, keep going in biology, and become that surgeon you wanted to be. I say that now in my, I'd say later years, and I only say that I look at myself on the screen. I go, yeah, gosh, you look like an old dude because I'm 69 years old, but I still think young because this industry does that to you. Okay. Well, now it's a question of, like you said, freelance guys, it's not that easy to pull a retirement together. So, will I keep drawing until I go? Probably, until, well, I hate to say it, I'm at that age where I'm starting to get arthritis. And sometimes you wake up in the morning and your fingers hurt, and you got to keep them loose. Okay. And if you're in that position holding a pen or a brush too long, and then you open up those knuckles again, you go, oh my God,
And
so,
your back and your
oh,
eyes and your
oh,
neck.
yeah. If I'm staring at a computer way too long, and sometimes I've had those things where, gosh, I'm scanning a 22-page story or a 32-page story because I drew the Phantom for Sweden, and I'd have to pencil and ink and then scan it all and send it out there.
Right.
And when you're scanning it, unfortunately, scanning is a great thing, but when you get to blow up your own panels to fill up the entire screen, you go, oh my God, that stinks. I gotta correct that. So then you spend like a half an hour to 45 minutes on each page cleaning things up. And then when you print it out on 6x9, the face that you were working on that needed features is about the size of a pinhead. And then, so I remember talking to Jimmy Palmiotti, and he said to me, he goes, Al, before you could scan it, you used to just send the pages into this comic book company, right? I said, yeah. He goes, because you looked at it, you were happy with it, you sent it in. I said, yeah. He goes, then if there's something that's coming out bleeding into the border, production takes care of that, whatever, okay? And then when they shoot it and they color it and they shrink it down, it's what you see in the book, right? I said, yeah. He goes, so forget about blowing it up and doing all that stuff. You drew it already. Don't draw it again. And so, yeah, it took a little time to finally get to that point where I would stay up all those long hours and my wife would say, are you going to be pulling up an all-nighter again? I said, nope, honey, I'm scanning it. I'm scanning it. I'm saving it, and I'm moving to the next one. So, no, but as far as telling my younger self, well, the thing is, yeah, I don't know if I'd want to change. And, the one thing about medicine and being a surgeon, if you're not passionate about it, it's not going to work. Would I have been passionate if I didn't have comics and I'm not going to say fall back on, but as what eventually became my passion? Okay, maybe I would have stuck it out and I would have done it to the best of my ability. But, to be a doctor and be a surgeon, and, my wife and I, we like to watch these medical shows, during the week, Chicago Med, Resident and stuff. And when you see what these people have to go through when they're facing patients, and God forbid they lose one, oh, man, I think I'd be.
I'm a nurse. I used to work in the hospital, not anymore.
Oh, well, there you go. When you can't get close to your patients, and they're human beings, and as much as you want to stay aloof to a certain point, you got to find that fine line where you're friendly and yet you're not caring, but you have to care to some degree.
I lost a patient. She was an older woman with dementia, and she became like a grandma to me. And when she died, I bawled. It was hard. So yeah, you're right.
So, well, but to tell my younger self, oh, okay, this is what I would have told my younger self around the time that I got into comics. Excuse me. I mean, I'm not saying I fought my way. As I told you, how I got in was really not that difficult. But I was in comics maybe for about 6 months, and Joe Kubert opened his school. And I would tell my younger self, go back to DC, tell them you can't work on Green Lantern anymore because you're going to Joe Kubert's school for the next 2 or 3 years. And you're going to really learn how to do it the right way. That's what I had told my younger self. Because I told my wife, if he would have opened up that school 6 months before I got in, I wouldn't have gone in. I'd be at that school. So many of my colleagues went. They got taught by Joe. They got taught by, so many, contemporaries at the time, showing them how to do things, if not the right way, and maybe the easier way, if not the right way. And just to be able to take all that knowledge that they want to give you, you're paying tuition, but I mean, they're there to teach you, and they're happy to do it. And so, like I said, going to school with Will Eisner, working with, the little bit of mentoring I had from John Romita, the 7 months of mentoring I had with Ross Andrew, all that stuff is invaluable. If you can have somebody really help you along those ropes, that's what I would tell my younger self. Go to the school, because at that time it wasn't available School of Visual Arts with Will Eisner. That's about all I had.
Right.
But and then of course, there were the older colleagues that lived in New York City or in Brooklyn, and they went to the High School of Art and Design, and that's where they got a lot of their stuff. And then they went on to comics after that because they were good enough to do it. But to learn from guys that know, that's invaluable.
Very cool. Before we go, Steve Garcia, who is an animator on the Iron Giant.
Oh, really?
Sir Alex, yeah, he's great.
Oh, that is so cool. Hey, man, I respect what you do. That's awesome.
He said, "Thank you so much for your awesome contribution to this awesome art form we all love. I've been needing a pick-me-up lately, and listening to your incredible stories have been just fascinating and awesome. Thanks so much." Just so you know, he will be at, oh no, he can't go to Baltimore. He was going to be at Baltimore, but you know what? Next time I have my 2-day show, I'm going to want you there. I'm going to bring Steve there, and I'll introduce you guys because he's a great guy. And he's been on other movies besides that and other projects, but he's a magnificent animator and just a great all-around guy. So, very cool.
Well, that sounds great. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Well, you're welcome, Roy. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm glad. Thank you for everybody that tuned in. I always have a good time talking about comics, talking to people who love comics. So, this was a lot of fun for me. I appreciate it.
Comics have been the mainstay in my life since I was 9 years old, and I'm 49, as I told you. And they got me through a rough childhood, and I kind of hate seeing where they're going right now, but I love them. I love the comics. I love the history. I love the people that, like yourself, that made this happen. And that's, I started this show for 2 reasons. I wanted to help the small indie people that need promotion, but I also wanted to get a chance to hear the stories and talk to people like yourself that have those stories. And unfortunately, the show's coming to an end next Friday just because I can't do it right now with so much going on.
Okay.
It'll probably be temporary, though. I might be back, but I've had a lot of greats tell us some great stuff. You and Bob Hall, I think, had the most fascinating stories and telling us some behind the scenes, and it's just interesting to listen to. And
that's because we're the older guys now. When I got into the business, I got to meet guys like Gil Kane and Carmine Infantino and Ross Andrew. John, as I said, John Romita, Nick Cardy. Oh my God, these guys would have the Jack Abel in the Marvel bullpen. These guys would have the best stories. I got to meet Don Heck and Frank Giacoya, and I just sit in the bullpen and listen to their stories. Okay.
Wow.
And now when I meet the younger guys, and sometimes it's like, hey, what are you guys doing for dinner? Oh, nothing. Oh, yeah, let's have dinner. So these younger guys then are asking me questions just like you are. And they go, oh yeah, you gotta go out with Alex because he's got great stories. I'm thinking, wow, it's the circle of life. It's you pass the buck.
Well, yeah, you're passing on your wisdom. Greg said, awesome to see your passion through your stories, which is true.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you.
Yeah, people gravitate to that. I had met you a few times at East Coast Comic-Con, but we never really talked. But I finally got to actually talk with you at Terrificon. It was great. And I was like, you know what? I like to meet people and face-to-face before I invite them on the show because I want you to know who I am at least a little bit before we're on. It just makes for a better show anyway. So I'm glad that I got to meet you and talk with you. And I am certainly glad that you were willing to come on. And I appreciate that you were understanding when I had to postpone. But
the nights are usually spent watching TV shows from the DVR. They don't go away; they're still there.
I know. So, I used to have a whole stack of them. Like, oh my God, now it's like work.
Yeah, it's like last season we never even got to watch The Blacklist, and so they're just advertising this Thursday, I think, or Friday, The Blacklist, and I go, wow, we don't even know what happened last season, so we gotta catch up.
I was watching Breaking Bad and I hadn't been up to date on that yet. And they did this commercial where this guy, Gus Fring, he's a major villain in the thing. They spoil something huge that happens to him in the commercial before I got to that episode. I was like, no, what the hell are you doing? So the moral of the story is catch up on your DVR.
Oh, yeah, and then there's on demand, and you can't fast forward. You got to listen to the commercials. I mean, good
Right.
gosh, right?
That's like horror, right? It's like I'm not used
Oh,
to this.
no, I know. My wife sits next to me, and she goes, "Can you fast forward?" I said, "No, this is on demand." She goes, "Oh, geez, I'm gonna get some coffee." Okay, go
Yeah.
ahead.
I don't care about Irish Spring or Madison Gill. Leave me alone.
And the bad thing about on demand is this: it's a cyclical run of ads. They have
Right.
4 ads, and they
Right.
keep running the same ads throughout that hour that you have to agonize through all those commercials. And I'm going, oh my
I
gosh,
can
this
only
is
take so many bathroom breaks. I agree.
yeah, right. I know. But at any rate,
Well,
this was show number 117. So next week, the next time is 118. So we'll look out for number 119 whenever you come back.
yeah, 119 is the last one next
Oh,
Friday. I didn't make it to 120 because of cancellations, but
right.
yeah, and it's too bad I'm not going to get to see you, Baltimore. Everybody, listen, right below scrolling, www.alexsaviuk.com. You can go there for merchandise. You can go there to order a commission from him. He's taking commissions. He will be at Baltimore Comic Con this weekend, which is an artists lovers show. If you like art, if you want books signed, Alex is there. Go to his table. If you saw this show, go tell him you watched the show and that you loved his stories. Show him a little love. Show him support. And he's got kids to feed now. So, so
No, no, they're
grandkids to feed.
yeah, okay. Well, no, I'm not feeding them. They're being taken
Yeah.
care of.
But either way, go support and get a commission. Fantastic art. Alex has not lost a step at all. Fantastic. Guys like you are what made me love this industry. So thanks for coming out. I really appreciate it.
Hey, just want to show something here on the screen if I can.
Sure. Let me go to full
Okay.
screen. Hang on. Wait, I can't go to.
Oh, I got to go this way. Okay.
There we go. Okay. Oh
Oh,
wow.
that's good. Now this is a drawing that I submitted to Baltimore Comic Con because they got the artist. They asked the artist to submit for a book that they're putting out, which I guess they're going to auction off and whatever,
Very
sell for
cool.
charity. And so this character I created, oh gosh, back when I was around 16 or 17, got the copyright for him. He's a character called the Hellsman. He came out way before Damon Helmstrom did at Marvel. Okay, and he's dead, but he's sort of hellbound, but yet he still fights the devil and ghoulies and everything else. So just for the horror aspect, I kind of brought him back for this one drawing,
Very
which is going to
cool.
be in that book. And I'm donating this artwork to their, I guess, physical artwork auction so that they can raffle it off for charity.
I love his face. I'm very big on faces. That's
Oh,
a
me
beautiful
too. If
piece.
a guy can't draw good faces, it's terrible, right?
It doesn't matter what the anatomy looks like. If the face is off, it's just like, oh,
Well,
yeah,
you know what? I did a lot of I taught myself to a major extent from this book called Figure Drawing for All It's Worth by Andrew Loomis. And it came out in 1939. And he even, in one of his little paragraph things, essays there, he says, if you can draw good faces and good hands, you will always get work.
absolutely.
Even
Two
though,
hardest things
even
to
though,
draw.
I mean, you look at Gene Colan. Gene Colan can have some funky anatomy going on with Daredevil swinging through the city. He's got like instead of a shoulder and a bicep and a forearm, he's got two shoulders, a bicep and a forearm that's way too long. And yet he draws handsome faces, beautiful women, unbelievable lighting, right? And he draws good hands.
Look at Umberto Ramos. He's got very
Yes,
cartoony. The ankles are pencil thin, the feet are big, floppy, but the hand gestures and the face when SpiderMan takes off. Exactly. Or Mike Mignola. He has
yes,
no shoulders like
right.
me, but the face is gritty and the hands, absolutely. I
Yeah.
agree.
So,
So
all right.
Keith said he loves it. So
All right, Keith. Sounds good.
Alex, thanks so much, man. Have a great night, and I look forward to seeing you at the next show.
Yeah, that sounds good. And you know what? Don't be a stranger. Stay in touch. I'm going to Baltimore this weekend, Denver next weekend, and in December I'll be at C2E2 in Chicago. If you have anybody tuning in from that that neck of the woods, I'll be there with my scarf, gloves, and coat.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm in Florida. I got to be prepared. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
all right, guys. Have a good evening then. Thanks
have a
very
great
much.
night. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye now.
So that's legendary Alex Saviuk. Obviously, man, just imagine being a fly on his shoulder with all the things he told us and things that we don't even know about. It's just fascinating to hear stories. Great guest, a lot of energy. I love his stories. Definitely, when I start this back up, want to have him back. Please, seriously, guys, www.alexsaviuk.com. Go check it out. Commission some artwork and go see him at the shows. Tell him you said, tell him I say hi when you go see him. Wonderful guest. Thank you for coming. I just want to remind everybody we have 2 shows left and then we're done. I won't say forever, but my schedule, I can't. Between art repping, putting out the book, selling the first book, working 3 jobs as a nurse, a father, husband, it's just too much. I had something had to give, unfortunately, and this is it. So I appreciate everybody that's been coming out and watching. Thank you. I do want to remind you again, Tragedy issue number 2 is launching on Kickstarter on November 1st. I'm going to do a live launch party at 7 p.m. on Monday, November 1st. I hope you come out and join me. I guess that'll technically be episode 120. But anyway, please go click the link that I have posted several times and hit notify me. It's a great indicator for me to know kind of what, if people are willing to come back and stuff. If you read the book and you read the ending, the shocking ending, I think you'll enjoy coming back for more. So, and Ricardo was just killing it with the interiors. I mean, he's stepping up big time. And Chris Sotomayor will be coloring the book. So come on out, Tragedy Chapter 2, Kickstarter, November 1st. Also, Sam Vera has his Forbidden, The Hunt, which is issue 2, starting on November 1st in Kickstarter and Indiegogo as well. We're going to do a cross-promotion. He did a nice piece of art for it, cross-promoting the characters, and it's going to be colored by Russ Cassidy, and it might be as we speak. You guys are awesome. I really appreciate you. Thanks for coming out and enjoying this time with us. And I'm going to leave you with what I always leave you with. Be legendary and have fun storming the castle.